nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for this look back at Alberta this week. A brief meeting between Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Ottawa began with a very awkward handshake Tuesday. The pair discussed shared aspirations and concerns over pending federal legislation aimed at helping Canadian workers adapt to the increasing global reliance on renewable energy. Smith has accused the Prime Minister of trying to decimate Alberta's oil and gas industry with his green transition legislation, but now says that she wants to at least try to work collaboratively. Here's a clip from that exchange.
Impression that the energy sector is going to be phased out. It's not going to be phased out. We're transforming away from high-intensity emissions to lower emissions. I think we have some shared priorities on that, on LNG export to reduce emissions using the green transfer mechanism to get credit here. That would also help British Columbia, working on critical minerals, hydrogen, geothermal, lithium. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to find some common ground.
Now, that meeting came ahead of the federal-provincial talks on healthcare funding between the Prime Minister and the Premiers Tuesday, where Trudeau presented an offer that would see transfers to the provinces rise by $196 billion over the next 10 years. The proposal falls well short of the demand from the provinces for the federal government to shoulder a much greater share of healthcare spending. And back on Alberta soil, Premier Smith told reporters she'll be meeting with her colleagues to determine what the province's response will be, and that the First Ministers all had anticipated a much higher share.
I think the Prime Minister made it pretty clear that it looked to me like that was his first and only offer. I'll be meeting with my First Minister colleagues, I think on Monday, to just see what our response will be. I know that there's a great amount of disappointment. They've been advocating on this issue for over 2.5 years. And so I think that they were anticipating that the new money would be a lot more. That being said, I think Alberta's share will be about $518 million new dollars. And I've already talked to my health minister about how he wants to deploy those dollars. We've already started on a very ambitious reform strategy.
Now, during that press conference, Smith also told reporters that she has spoken personally with Pastor Artur Pawlowski, who was jailed for violating pandemic restriction orders. Pawlowski recently faced 2 days of trial in the Lethbridge Provincial Courthouse for his involvement at the Coutts border blockade last winter. He faces charges of breaching a release order and mischief after he allegedly encouraged truckers to keep blocking the border crossing, charges Pawlowski has pleaded not guilty to. The court case will reconvene February 17th for the judge's decision. However, the Premier says she has spoken personally with Pawlowski about his specific charges.
You know, I've talked to everyone who has concerns about some of the enforcement orders that are against them, and I have told them the same thing that I have told all of you, that I'm awaiting to see the result of a couple of different cases. I'm taking the advice of my Attorney General, and that we'll have to wait for the process to play out. I have always said that I campaigned on it for 7 months, that I would look into what the options were for amnesty, and that I would look into what the options were on that. And my Justice Minister came back and said that amnesty is not possible for a Premier. The only role of amnesty is the Governor General in our country, the way our system works.
The Alberta government announced it's expanding the New Beginnings bursary to help 1,700 low-income students to become nurses. Government officials say thanks to an additional $8.5 million investment into the initiative, the nursing students will be eligible for a one-time non-repayment $5,000 bursary. Those in nursing programs will be automatically selected from student loan applicants who meet program and financial eligibility criteria. But Alberta's opposition NDP was not impressed with the announcement. Advanced education critic David Egan says the funding is pennies on the dollar compared to the cuts and increased costs students have faced under the UCP.
Quite literally, we have a crisis in post-secondary of affordability. Tuition increases have happened every year since the UCP government took power. And then that's being compounded with a general affordability crisis that we are all feeling in the province, and maybe students even more. And so while the government is announcing some small measure for low-income students, quite literally all the students are experiencing unaffordable tuition and expenses at this juncture here in the province.
You won't want to miss what's coming up after the break. We catch up with a youngster who's overcoming an obstacle with the help of a robotic arm. That's next. Welcome back. A young boy from Bow Island who suffers from a genetic condition which inhibits his ability to eat independently is pushing the limits thanks to a new robotic device. As Angela Stewart explains, this robot could be the first of its kind in Canada.
Machine's tricky.
Ever since he was born, he's had to rely on the help of his parents because of a debilitating and rare joint condition.
It's kind of hard to do stuff myself.
Completing routine tasks like eating is a challenge for this little 9-year-old boy, simply because his range of motion is severely affected. But now, Reed Hintz is defying all the odds, thanks to a new revolutionary piece of equipment.
It's very cool for me because no one has to feed me. I can do it myself.
It's called Obi, a robotic feeding device controlled with just the touch of a button, and it comes with a hefty price tag. It also could be the first of its kind for Canada.
This unit is $10,000, just a little bit over $10,000 Canadian, and that is quite an expensive endeavor. However, the technology in it definitely makes it show its value.
It all started in 2019 when the young boy was featured in an Adapt mobility commercial. Community members learned about Reed and his story and didn't hesitate for a second to help him.
So they contributed some money towards the start of paying for the Obi.
The new dining device now gives Reed just a little bit more independence, something his mom says they will forever be grateful for.
I think it's an amazing that we live in this community in which there's still good people that, without even personally knowing Reed, donated a miracle device. It was something that would have took us a long time to save for, to provide for him. He gets to be one of the kids. He doesn't have to focus on his disabilities.
Means a lot to me that I can eat and then Mom and Dad don't have to be there all the time.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
So sweet. We wish the best to Reed and his family. Alberta Health Services has announced that cancer patients will now be treated with new technology from the world's most advanced radiation therapy in the treatment of tumors. Grants and funding for the project came in at an estimated $25 to $30 million. The Alberta created and built LINAC MR machine will begin with clinical trials at the Cross Cancer Institute in Edmonton.
Can we do this? Because if we do this, we have significant improvement in cure rates, less side effects, and less treatment times. What else do you want? Right now, in Alberta, 50% of all cancers get radiation as a treatment. Other places in Europe, they may even more radiation, 60, 70%. At this moment, it's about 50%. This machine now, because of its ability to take care of motion, especially in the abdominal area, liver, pancreas, kidney, lung, moves. Now you could treat the other 50%. For all cancer tumors.
According to a 2022 report by the Canadian Cancer Society, the number of people living with cancer in our country has grown to over 1.5 million. The operating room at Canmore General Hospital is shutting down on weekends due to a shortage of nurses. The hospital says the closure means pregnant patients needing care must go to Calgary from Friday afternoon until Monday morning. The maternity clinic says the service disruption is expected to last until March 27th. According to the Alberta Health Services website, no other hospitals in the Calgary zone are experiencing temporary service disruptions, but 34 other sites across the province are, including 7 affecting obstetrics. The province announced a new agri-processing tax credit officials say will attract more investment, create jobs, and help to diversify the Alberta economy. Agriculture Minister Nate Horner says the province will provide a non-refundable tax credit to support the growth and attract investment.
The new Alberta Agri-Processing Investment Tax Credit will launch this spring. and will provide a 12% non-refundable tax credit to eligible businesses. Those businesses will have to make a minimum capital investment of $10 million in value-added agri-processing in the province. The program will build on our competitive advantages and create a business environment that attracts even more industry to ensure Alberta's agri-processing sector reaches its full potential.
If Alberta's provincial election was held today, it would appear as though Danielle Smith and the UCP would be re-elected. A recent poll by Think HQ says the UCP currently has 48% support compared to the NDP's 45%. And a poll by Abacus Data similarly shows the UCP in the lead with 47% in favor compared to 45% in favor of NDP. After the break, our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will discuss how this is the first time in quite a while the UCP has been in the lead. He'll also have more on Premier Smith's meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Ottawa recently. That is next. Keep it right here. Welcome back. A new poll for May's Alberta election shows the UCP leading the NDP. While the UCP expects to take seats in and around Edmonton, it seems that both parties are setting their efforts on the city of Calgary. Our legislative reporter and Alberta correspondent for the National Post sat down with our own Hal Roberts to talk about the election possibilities. Here's their conversation.
Tyler, it may have been a little bit awkward between the PM and Premier Smith, but you got her message across in a hurry. But you didn't, however, discuss healthcare right away, but instead talked more about the federal government's Just Transition Plan.
Yeah, so, a lot of Danielle Smith news in the past day or so from that First Minister's conference, as you mentioned. There was a handshake in which she sort of stuck her hand out and then seemed to change her mind, but Trudeau kind of lunged for it and grabbed it before she could pull it away. It was a very strange television moment. But, perhaps is hinting at some of the awkwardness between her and the Prime Minister, which I think is probably safe to say exists. She did talk just transition. Of course, this goes back, a month or so now when Jonathan Wilkinson, the Natural Resources Minister, announced the details of a just transition would be coming. This is, of course, the Liberal plan to retrain and transition people from oil and gas jobs to whatever else, clean energy jobs, janitorial jobs, a variety of possibilities there. And that caused quite a bit of consternation in Alberta political circles. In fact, you had this amazing moment of bipartisan unity when Rachel Notley also said that this plan needs to be scrapped and they need to go back to the drawing board. So Smith had been quite bullish in the beginning, but then maybe last week or the week before, had a more conciliatory letter saying she wanted to talk with Trudeau about this. And they did apparently have that discussion, and there are apparently some areas of agreement. LNG and hydrogen, for example, being two of those. So she talked about that. Did talk about healthcare, and healthcare, I think, is really the thing that everyone is watching at the moment.
Yeah, let's talk about that proposal from the Trudeau government here. 10 years, $196 billion for healthcare for the provinces, and many would argue that it would help solve some of the healthcare issues we've been facing right here in our province.
That's right. And we don't know at this point how much money from that might be going to Alberta. Now, only I think about $46 billion of that is new funding. The rest of it was already sort of baked in Canada Health Transfer funding. So that's the Liberal proposal. I'm sure there's going to be back and forth. I'm sure we're going to hear, even if the deal gets signed, I'm sure we're going to hear complaints from the premiers about it in the weeks and months ahead. The sticking point for the last couple months has been the Liberal government in Ottawa wants conditions on that funding. They want some of it to go, for example, to data collection, so that there'll be sort of a national database of statistics across the province or across the country, I should say. And the provincial premiers have been very reluctant to agree to any conditions. So I think we'll see some back and forth on that. And then, of course, we'll see what's done with that money, where exactly it's going to go in the healthcare system. And that, of course, remains to be seen. And, of course, some of the problems with the healthcare system, the doctor shortage, nurse shortage, for example, those are not problems that an influx of money can solve immediately. So we'll have to see what the government dreams up on that front as well.
Now, Tyler, the extra funding in healthcare is potentially good news for Danielle Smith's UCP as we lead up to the provincial election in May.
It is. You know, a lot of polling suggests that some of the bread and butter issues are the ones that are really on Albertans' minds right now. So that's things like healthcare, that's things like education. And so if they can, you know, they should, in theory, by the time the election rolls around in May, be able to point to this as a bit of a win. So, you know, we negotiated this alongside the other premiers and it'll do X, Y, Z.
Let's talk a bit about the new poll that says the UCP is now leading the NDP in Alberta. According to the folks with Think HQ, voter intentions are, 48% support for Daniel Smith's party, while 45% would support Rachel Notley's NDP. It appears as though the NDP have a healthy lead in Edmonton, the UCP, as you mentioned, in rural Alberta. So that leaves my hometown of Calgary as a real battleground.
It's a tight race in Calgary. You know, I think you said 48 to 45 across the province. In Calgary, it's 47 UCP, 45 for the New Democrats. So that's, I think, where you're really going to see the fight, especially, I think, in some of the suburban ridings. You know, I think downtown probably swings a little bit more New Democrat. So it'll be in some of those sort of outside areas and maybe some of the bedroom communities of Edmonton as well that are the battlegrounds. And of course, Lethbridge will likely have a seat or two that are going to be hotly contested. But, you know, it just it really suggests that the tone is shifting perhaps in Alberta. And that's definitely going to be something to watch. In addition to the fact that because Calgary is likely to be the battleground, we have to wonder what this government is going to do for Calgary.
Coming up after the break, what did many retired police officers and military members do after the COVID mandates came into effect? We'll find out next. Stay with us. When the federal and provincial mandates came into effect here in Canada, many police officers and military members took notice of the contradiction these government mandates had with both the Canadian Bill of Rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Enter the group Police on Guard for Thee. I sat down with the group's chairman, Clay Farnsworth, to talk about the organization and their mandate of freedom. Have a look. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what Police on Guard for Thee is?
We're an information-based group, okay? We're nonpartisan. We don't support a political party one way or the other. But what we do believe in is the truth. And we believe in our charter and we believe in our Constitution. And the longer that we're diving into this and seeing the egregious policies brought forth by the governments, provincially, federally, and even at the municipal levels, that are avoiding the charter, what we're there for is to inform people that this is wrong, and it's 100% wrong. So on our website, Police on Guard, our www.policeonguard.ca, you can find all sorts of information from our legal team, Rocco Galati. He does Question Tuesdays, where you can ask him questions and we send them into Rocco and he'll answer them. We've got a wealth of information from doctors and scientists around the world. So basically what we do is we're providing information and letting you decide for yourself, okay? But we also follow the court cases across Canada routinely and write our opinion as to where they've gone wrong. Now, you got to appreciate we've got thousands of people that have sworn an oath to the Charter. The mounted police swear their oath to the Queen, not to the Charter. But we've sworn to uphold the laws in Canada. So you take 1,500, 2,000 policemen that have spent hours upon hours in court. And looking at this, we have a wealth of knowledge. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand the Constitution or the Charter. So we have a wealth of knowledge that we're gathering all the time and understanding where the government is going wrong. And the courts too. There's many poor court decisions not based on the Charter.
We've seen so much overreach with banks and the shutting down of bank accounts and then monitoring activity. And then in one case, there was where a credit union employee was monitoring the person's Facebook page. So, I mean, with yourself, from your experience in policing, is this typical practice of financial institutions to do this? I would
It
say
is
not.
totally a breach of everything within the banking acts
Yeah.
because of privacy. It's a total breach of the charter and the laws within Canada. Financial institutions cannot do that and release that information to any authority without having the proper court documents. And so what we're seeing is people's rights being eroded at immense levels. And unfortunately, the Canadian people either aren't concerned about their rights being eroded or don't understand that their rights are being eroded, and using COVID as the flag to do it. I'm sorry. You can't do that.
Clay, how does this make you feel about the direction that Canada is headed?
I am, without a better word for it, I'm sickened by it. I started my policing career prior to the charter, and I had to learn, and many members of my generation kicked garbage cans because it seemed that every time we'd come to work after a few days off, there was a new court decision that had changed our process and our procedures. So we were constantly evolving and learning and fighting the growth of the charter. But once we got all the bugs worked out of it, I became a fan of the charter. I literally did. And I understood that this was going to make us be better policemen. We couldn't shortcut things. We couldn't trample people's rights. We had to follow strict guidelines set by the courts in order to get our convictions for the bad guys. During the time in the 80s, were there criminals that walked that shouldn't have, that wouldn't have prior to the charter? Yes, because everybody was learning. The courts were learning, the lawyers were learning, and especially the enforcement agencies were learning how to make changes to comply with that. But once you did that and followed the procedures set down by the court and case law, I mean, everything is decided through case law, you had really, really strict cases that lawyers had a hard time to beat because there was no avenue to beat it anymore.
After the break, our local news kicks off with high school athletes making big strides. Welcome back to Lethbridge Collegiate Institute. Football players are ready to kick off their new careers with a couple of universities from Regina and Toronto. The school held a signing for the soon-to-be post-secondary players. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains, the coach with the high school football team says he's proud of how each player got to this point.
To have two of our guys this year, Connor and Jake, move on to play post-secondary ball kind of shows that we're moving in the direction that we want to as a program, and hopefully we continue doing that.
Connor Broad and Jake Jurasic are ready to hit the road and start fresh with York University and the University of Regina. The head coach of athletics at LCI, Pat Leahy, says the two players had a huge impact on the football team. He also mentioned that Lethbridge has a long history of churning out players that have seen great success in major football leagues and divisions across North America.
The history of Lethbridge putting out really solid CFL players, guys like Brad Ardos from CCH, obviously the Got Boys from LCI. We've got two kids from LCI playing Division I football right now in the States.
It clicked right away for Broad that he would be heading to York University to study criminology. He explained exactly what stood out to him during his time with LCI and the football team.
I've only played football for 2-3 years now, and getting to know Coach Leahy as well as Coach Dave Lowry, which they were both big impacts in my life, and they kind of introduced me to the sport as well as a few of the different teammates that I had.
Jurasic said he is hoping to get into the sciences and receive a chemistry degree at the University of Regina. Once that's completed, he told us he'll be looking to get into pharmacy school. He reflected on his football journey at LCI and how important it was in building up his confidence.
Being an out-of-town player, I was definitely nervous coming in, but I definitely felt like the coaching staff, players adopted me well, had a great time, and loved it here.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. A very familiar Hollywood face is being asked to be this year's parade marshal for the Spock Days celebration in the town of Vulcan, Alberta. Following an episode on Conan O'Brien's podcast, the comedian became aware of the Star Trek-themed town and soon became fascinated with its inception of the TV franchise. Shortly after, the town then extended an invite to O'Brien to be the parade marshal and the costume cosplay judge.
Like, he was on there and he was so fascinated with what we were doing here and all that stuff. And he, at the end of the podcast, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, he says, "Oh, I'm going to Vulcan, tell the people I'm coming to Vulcan." So we thought, well, why not throw that out there to him and see if he'd be interested in being the parade marshal and the costume cosplay judge. So we thought we'd send him the invite, wouldn't hurt, and see what happens from there. So it's just, if he's willing to come, it'd be great for sure. I know we've had lots of different support from different people in different groups, radio groups and TV, things like that. So we're going to just kind of keep pushing and see what we hear and just hope for the best. Fingers crossed.
This year's Spock Days will take place from July 28th through the 30th. The University of Lethbridge is putting out the welcome mat to their soon-to-be new president and vice chancellor. Dr. Digvir Jayas was announced as the new president back on January 19th, and this week he visited the campus for the very first time. Dr. Jayas, who has an agriculture research background, says he's looking forward to being a part of an institution that contributes to a lot of the agriculture sector.
When I saw the number of agriculture-related companies in the town, and I certainly would like to explore the partnership with them, whether it is through engineering program we want to develop an agriculture and food-related area or sustainable agriculture area, and engage those companies in building that program. And also, I would say, engaging them to know how we can work also with college, Lethbridge College, together to develop a unique training program for meet the industry needs if we don't have a degree program.
A member of the Board of Governors for the university says Dr. Jayas brings a lot to the table and they look forward to working alongside him.
Dr. Jayas has a number of important attributes. I mean, first of all, the research that he's done in the past directly ties to Southern Alberta. I mean, his area of research was in agriculture. He's an agricultural engineer, so there's a great fit there. But more importantly, he is a tremendous individual. He is Order of Canada. I mean, that's not something that comes easily. It's a real testament to his character. He's had tremendous administrative experience as a Vice President of Research and Internationalization at the University of Manitoba. And he's a good fellow. He listens to you, he wants to collaborate, and he wants you to be successful.
The new president will officially begin his role on July the 1st. When we return, what's next for Alberta? We know the spring election is just a few months away. What does the UCP have planned leading up to May? We hear from Deputy Premier and Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf on their progress and plans. We'll be right back.